Good afternoon, viewers. Welcome once again in the webinar series from Nova IVF Fertility. Today, in the panel discussion, we welcome Dr. Aswati Nair, who would be enlightening us on recurrent IVF failures. Now, telling something about our consultant, Dr. Aswati Nair. She did her MBBS from Topiwala National Medical College and BYL Nair Charitable Hospital, Mumbai. And she was the recipient of JRD Tata Merit Scholarship in all 3 professional years. Her profound interest in infertility made her pursue FNB reproductive medicine, wherein she was one of the toppers in the entrance examination conducted by the National Board of Examinations. She has also successfully completed the training course in laparoscopy conducted by the surgical disciplines at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. She has made numerous presentations at various national and international conferences and received the Best Paper Award at ISAR Kerala chapter for her original research work on the use of embryo glue in patients with recurrent implantation failures. She is a lifetime member of Indian Society of Assisted Reproduction, that is ISAR, and the Indian Fertility Society. So welcome Dr. Aswati Nair. I would request all the viewers that we would be having a live Q&A session and you can all write us and you can write your queries on all about fertility at novaivfertility.com and also give us a call on toll-free numbers. So welcome Dr. Aswati. I zoom over the session to Dr. Aswati Nair.
Thank you so much for a very kind introduction, Romsha. And I welcome all the viewers of this webinar on one of the topics that is very close to my heart of what should be done for repeated or recurrent IVF failures. Over a period of time when I started, after I started my practice as a fertility physician, one thing that really, touched my heart was how much trouble these people go through to undergo an IVF cycle. It is not only physically draining, it's an emotional roller coaster ride for the couple and the family. And the third and the important aspect which we cannot neglect is the financial aspect of it. And once a patient goes through all this and till date, as we all understand that IVF or ICSI is considered the utmost level of treatment that anyone can seek in the field of fertility, and when that fails, that is really a big setback for the couple, and many a times they really lose hope that their dream of becoming parents are like really shattered. So I have seen that whenever such couple visits me, first of all, to bring that couple from that level of negativity or that level where they have really lost their hope, to rekindle their hopes back and to tell them, no, there is something that we could still try and we should not give up, is I think one of the most important things that I do as a fertility physician. And I actually, I mean, if I put it in my own experience, then I would say that I tackle it as a mathematical equation, because everything somehow can be related to mathematics. So it is like if you analyze a case in detail, many of the times, I wouldn't say that I would be able to crack all the cases, but many of the cases I have cracked just on the basis of understanding the smaller details of it. And whenever I have come across a cause where we could do something about it, and we have worked on those lines, we have gained success. And over a period of time, it's been more than 3 years for me in Nova. And right now, I think it is one of my fortes, because I do get a lot of patients who have been referred to me from all over Delhi, and even international patients from Nepal who have underwent IVF failures there. And people with lot of trust refer these patients to me, and many of them, with God's grace and of course our technical expertise and hard work, have gained success and have become parents. So let us now today begin this webinar of what should be done for repeated or recurrent IVF failures. Next slide, please. Now coming to the overall success rate of pregnancy rates of IVF. Now it's one of the most important aspects I feel. You know, whenever a couple is visiting me and once I have analyzed the couple thoroughly, both the male and the female partner, and suppose, you know, if they fit into the indication where an IVF cycle needs to be done, then it becomes very imperative as a part of, as a treating physician, that I tell them the I prognosticate their case, or what it actually means is tell them what are their chances of conceiving in one particular IVF cycle. So this is very important. You know, if you give them a realistic picture, subsequently, if the couple succeeds, then it's a win-win situation for everybody. But suppose if the IVF cycle does not succeed, the couple still would not go into that frame of mind where they lose all the hope. Because suppose if the chances of a couple conceiving, depending on various factors, is nearly 25 to 30%. So if you just tell them out of 10, 3 of them, you who have similar conditions like you can conceive, then they also understand it. Okay, so it's like 7 of them won't conceive and 3 of them will conceive. So for such a couple, later on, if the treatment is not successful, it is easier for them to accept it and move ahead. So if we talk about the average pregnancy rates, now average pregnancy rates this is a cumulative pregnancy rate. It could be 100% for a couple who's conceiving in the first attempt, and it could be, so average if we take, then the success rate would be around 65%. Mind you, this is just the pregnancy rates. The live birth rate would still be the tune of around 45%, because yes, as in natural pregnancies, even IVF pregnancies can have miscarriages or certain other, ectopic pregnancies or all those things. So that accounts for nearly 15 to 20% of cases. And only say out of these 65%, maybe 45% would end up delivering a live birth rate. So this is the actual success rate of IVF. Now coming to what are the factors affecting IVF successes. The first and the foremost factor is the age of women. So suppose if I have 2 patients walking into my clinic, somebody is just telling me, clinically, okay, their reports are normal and, everything seems okay, but both for some unfortunate reason, both have to undergo IVF. And if they just ask me point blank without even me examining the patient or going through her records, say one is 35 years and one is 25 years, who has a maximum chances of conception? Then, it's easier for me to predict that probably the 25-year-old would have a better chance at conceiving. So that is the influence of age on IVF success. Second is a previous pregnancy that has occurred already. Third is the severity of the fertility problem that we are dealing with. Fourth will be certain lifestyle habits or certain corrections that we can make so that we can enhance their chances of conceiving. And fifth and foremost, and one of the most important in the list, where was the treatment done? About the fertility clinic. Next slide, please. Okay. So age of the woman is one of the most important factor, and as we all know, all of us women are dealing with or battling with rather with our biological clock, because this biological clock has set a time frame for our ovarian reserve from going from normal to low. So this is because of the number of eggs that keeps reducing during the lady's lifetime. We have this biological clock set for us. So as the age increases, the success rate of any IVF cycle would go down. So if we think about a woman who's less than 35 years, her chances of live birth rate will be approximately 42%. Vis-a-vis, just 5+ years apart. So for anybody who's more than 40 years of age, the chances drops down by 30%, that is around 12%. So this is the difference in the rate. And live birth rate at any age using donor eggs would be to the tune of around 51% to around 55%. Next slide, please. So what exactly happens, what we have observed over a period of time is that as the age advances, so if you just look at this graph on the left side, you can see this plotting on blue. So this is the fertility potential of the lady, which as we can see at the age of between 20 to 24, it is at maximum. And then, it till around 30 to 34, it is kind of a downslide graph, but not a sharp fall. But beyond 34, you can see there's a sharp fall in the fertility potential. And, as the age advances, it would further go down and maybe be at zero at some point. And the second graph that is plotted in dotted red lines, you can see that even if such patients conceive at extremes of age, the chances of spontaneous abortions or miscarriages is very high. So if we see somebody at the age of 45 years, then their chances of miscarrying is close to more than 90%. Now, why is this so? The most common reason for declining pregnancy rates with age and increased rate of both miscarriages and genetic abnormality like Down syndrome is due to the abnormalities of the egg as a result of aging. So at the extremes of age, we are not only battling with decrease in the number of eggs, but we are also battling with the depleted quality of the eggs. So this is one of the prime determinant factors of IVF success, because if we have a good robust oocyte, then of course our embryo also would be good, given the condition that the sperms are all right, which I will come to in the subsequent part of the lecture. Next slide, please. Okay, now as I had mentioned initially, now couple history. Now history of previous pregnancy. So any couple who has undergone a pregnancy, or any lady who has successfully undergone a pregnancy, we know that the process of implantation is all right. Now for any pregnancy to happen, even in today's era of IVF, what science and technology knows is how to make these embryos in the laboratory and to keep them safely back into the uterus. What happens after that, it is still a mystery or still an enigma, and we really don't know what happens after that. So whenever a lady, so this implantation process is still a mysterious thing that can happen, cannot happen, even with the best of embryos being placed. So suppose if somebody has had a previous successful pregnancy, then we know that their chances of implantation and carrying the pregnancy to term is quite better than those who have never had a pregnancy. So अगर किसी का पहले बेबी हो चुका है, तो हम ये कह सकते हैं कि उनके चांसेस प्रेग्नेंट होने के ज्यादा रहती है. Now coming to duration of married life. अब ये भी एक, अगर हम लॉजिकली भी सोचे, अगर कोई कपल है जिनकी शादी को काफी साल हो चुका है, एंड काफी साल से एटलीस्ट मोर देन 5 years, then और कोई एक couple है who's recently married, say maybe 1 or 2 years, then of course the chances, if I prognosticate, then the chances of that couple who is married for a shorter duration of time will be better. But of course this cannot be set as a thumb rule, but yes, this could be applicable in most of the cases. Next slide, please. Severity of the fertility problem. Now, this is again one of the very, very important factors which can determine the IVF success rates. And herein, we can, differentiate into 3 parts. One, we check the ovarian reserve of the patient. So, for any patient whose ovarian reserve is on the lower side, we know that, whatever age she may be in, but if her ovarian reserves are on the lower side, and that can be determined by her antral follicle count, which could be done by a transvaginal sonography on day 2, day 3, or the AMH value, we can tell, once that ovarian reserves are low, the number of oocytes that we can expect out of them would be low, and subsequently the number of embryos that will be formed out of them will be low. So ovarian reserve is one of the important determinant factors for fertility. The second thing is any associated factors in the uterus which can hamper our process of implantation. And those could be in the form of fibroids, it could be in the form of polyps, which are just small endometrial overgrowth or endometrial tags which could be present. It could be in the form of adhesions in the uterine cavity. यूट्रस के अंदर जाले होना, जिसको हम commonly हिंदी में कहते हैं कि यूट्रस के अंदर जाले हैं. या adenomyosis. Adenomyosis is a condition which is quite close to fibroid, but not exactly fibroid. There are technical differences, but yes, that could be another factor which could be present, like, and especially in women who have endometriosis associated, और इनमें फिर implantation जो है वो कम होती है. And also one subset of patients is those with uterine anomalies. Now again, if the uterus is having some anomaly, then the chances of implantation of an embryo further goes down. And now coming, so this was all about females, and we discussed them in detail. We have dissected to their ovary, we have dissected at the level of the uterus. Now let us talk about the male partner. Yes, you also have a very, very important role in determining the success of an IVF cycle. Many a times we have seen that even in young female patients with excellent oocyte quality, we don't get pregnancy because the problem lies with the semen parameters. And something that we can assess further is a DNA fragmentation index, which I will be coming to in the later part of the webinar. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now coming to lifestyle factors, as I had mentioned initially. So what lifestyle factors could be relevant here is the weight of the patient. Now she could be either underweight or overweight. And what do we consider as underweight? Any lady with a BMI of less than 18 kilograms per meter square. And overweight is any lady who's more than 25 kilograms per meter square. Either of the extreme cases, the chances of IVF would reduce. Other factors could be associated habit disorders like smoking. I wouldn't call addiction per se. Yes, addiction of course would be a deterring factor, but smoking, alcohol intake, all these things, and certain lifestyle related illnesses like diabetes mellitus could result in decreased fertility for a woman. Next slide, please. Now, the last and one of the most important, as I had mentioned, is the fertility clinic. Now, how to choose the right fertility clinic for you? So, it depends. It should all depend upon the expertise of the doctors who are going to deal with you, the experience of the doctor, the technology that is being used, the success rate, and of course, the ethicalness of the center. And you know, I would add a sixth one from my side, the personal involvement of your doctor in your treatment. Most of my patients who conceive, they give me this feedback that, you know, probably our treatment was not successful elsewhere because nobody took a very personal interest in what is happening. And that I think is because, you know, whenever you're going through an IVF cycle, it is very important that, you know, you feel that there is somebody who's involved with you in the treatment. And, you know, if a doctor is involved with you in the treatment so much, then it of course boosts your confidence also. It increases that positivity in you. And I think that's one of the very important factors when you decide where to get your IVF cycle done. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now coming to certain causes of IVF failure, you know, what could be the cause of it? As I told you, for me, it's very imperative that if a couple comes to me with repeated IVF failures, my consultation with them would definitely be for more than 1 hour. And my staff also knows that. The reason is I go through each and every document that they have. I try to extract each and every detail from that patient or from that couple so as to try and understand what exactly went wrong. Because, you know, most of the times when these couples come to us with so many failures, personally, I feel, you know, I always tell them, if after going through your clinical records or after examining you and after getting a good history from you and taking out all the minute details, if I feel that I can do anything better than this, only then, you know, you should go for a repeat cycle with me. Otherwise, because if I feel, you know, whatever best could have been done has been done, then probably just pushing them for another cycle will not change anything. So for me, that in the first consultation becomes very, very important, because that is what I mentally decide on, whether this patient will actually benefit from what I do, or what I do or not. And if at all I feel that there's nothing much I can do, and I think as a clinician, I be very honest with the patient and tell them, you know, whatever best possible things that could be done have been done. So maybe suggest them some alternative ways by which they can, they can fulfill the dream of parenthood. So now coming to the causes of IVF failure. Next slide, please. Now, if we divide the causes, then there are three basic causes. Now, the problem could be with the embryo, the problem could be with the uterus, or it could be multifactorial problems. अब सिंपल लैंग्वेज में अगर हम बोले तो या तो ये एम्ब्रियो की प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है, या बच्चेदानी में कोई दिक्कत हो सकती है, या कोई और कारण हो सकता है जिसकी वजह से ये प्रेगनेंसी नहीं हो रही। तो अगर हम एम्ब्रियो की बात करें तो एम्ब्रियो हमें पता है कि इट इज एम्ब्रियो इज फॉर्म्ड एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ फ्यूजन ऑफ द स्पर्म एंड द एग। तो अगर एम्ब्रियो की क्वालिटी में खराबी हो तो आइदर एग में खराबी हो सकती है या स्पर्म में खराबी हो सकती है। अगर यूट्रस में कोई दिक्कत है तो यूट्रस पर से मैं नहीं कहूंगी, बट यूट्रस में कोई अगर प्रॉब्लम है, जैसे कोई भी दिक्कत हो, जैसे फाइब्रॉइड, एडिनोमायोसिस जो हमने बात करी थी, तो वो ये एम्ब्रियो की जो चिपकने की क्षमता है, जो इम्प्लांटेशन वाली पोटेंशियल है उसकी, वो कम कर देगी। तो अगेन हमारी प्रेगनेंसी नहीं होगी। और मल्टीफैक्टोरियल कॉजेज में कई सारे पेशेंट्स जो है वो कई सारे मेडिकल प्रॉब्लम से जूझते हैं। और इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट अगर किसी के ऐसे रेकरेंट फेलियर्स हो रहे हैं तो आप इन प्रॉब्लम्स को पहले केटर करें, पहले आप उनकी वो उसको आप एक लिमिट में आप कंट्रोल में ले आए मेडिसिन द्वारा, या जिस भी फॉर्म ऑफ ट्रीटमेंट से आप उसे कंट्रोल में ला सकते हैं, उसके बाद ही आप नेक्स्ट ट्रीटमेंट साइकिल अटेम्प्ट करें। नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज। अब अगर हम oocytes और स्पर्म्स की बात करें तो अगर हमें पता है कि ये सारी चीजें जो है इट हैपेंस इन एन आईवीएफ लेबोरेटरी, और आईवीएफ लेबोरेटरी में जो कल्चर कंडीशंस होते हैं और यहाँ पे क्वालिटी ऑफ द मीडिया और जो हम टेक्नोलॉजी का यूज करते हैं, या किस तरह से हम अपना लैब मेंटेन करते हैं, या किस तरह से हर सेंटर अपना लैब मेंटेन करता है, ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होता है। क्योंकि अगर ये चीज सही नहीं रहेगी, आपकी कल्चर कंडीशन सही नहीं रहेंगी, तो जो अल्टीमेटली जो एम्ब्रियो बनेगी उसकी क्वालिटी भी सही नहीं रहेगी। सो if we consider the gamete factor, then it could either be oocyte factor, or it could be problems with the sperm, it could be problems associated with the culture conditions, or it could be some genetic issue because of which the embryo euploid or a normal embryo is not forming, or normal or good quality embryo is not being formed. Next slide please. अगर हम स्पर्म्स की बात करें तो यस, ये साइलेंट पार्टनर नहीं होता। हालांकि फर्टिलिटी ट्रीटमेंट में ज्यादातर प्रोसीजर्स और सब कुछ लेडी ही अंडरगो करती है, बट स्पर्म्स आर हीरोज ऑल थ्रू आउट। सो अगर हम स्पर्म्स की बात करें तो स्पर्म की हम यूजुअली जो असेसमेंट होती है वो सीमेन एनालिसिस के द्वारा करते हैं, जिसमें हम स्पर्म की काउंट, मोटिलिटी और स्पर्म की स्ट्रक्चरल एनालिसिस करते हैं, मॉर्फोलॉजी जो उसकी स्ट्रक्चर है उसको स्टडी करते हैं और डिटरमाइन करते हैं कि ये स्पर्म्स ठीक है या नहीं। बट जब ये रेकरेंट अच्छे स्पर्म्स होने के बावजूद अगर रेकरेंट आईवीएफ फेलियर्स हो रहे हैं तो हमें ये जरूर देखना चाहिए कि ये स्पर्म की डीएनए जो है वो सही है या नहीं, बिकॉज देयर आर मेनी कंडीशंस, बहुत सारे कंडीशंस होते हैं जिसमें स्पर्म्स की डीएनए डैमेज होती है। शायद उन पेशेंट्स की काउंट ठीक हो, उनकी मोटिलिटी ठीक हो, स्ट्रक्चर वाइज भी मोर और लेस स्पर्म्स ठीक हो, बट अगर डीएनए डैमेज्ड है तो ऐसे स्पर्म का यूज करने से जो एम्ब्रियो बनेगा वो भी एबनॉर्मल रहेगा। अगर टू नेम अ फ्यू कंडीशंस वेयर दिस sperm DNA can get damaged is one of the most important causes is addiction, like smoking. There could be conditions like varicocele. Varicocele उसे कहते हैं जहाँ पे जो स्क्रोटम के अराउंड जो venous channels होते हैं वो फूल जाती है, तो इसीलिए जो स्क्रोटल टेम्परेचर है वो बढ़ जाता है और इस वजह से जो स्पर्म्स बनते हैं टेस्टिस में वो डैमेज हो जाते हैं या उसकी डीएनए खराब हो जाती है. अल्कोहल एडिक्शन इज अनदर इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग. बहुत सारे आजकल आपको पता ही है रिक्रिएशनल ड्रग्स और मेडिकेशंस जो यूज हो रहे हैं उससे भी ये हार्म हो सकता है. वन ऑफ द वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग्स, बहुत सारे पेशेंट्स आते हैं जो काफी फिजिकली बहुत अपने आप को एक्टिव मतलब हेल्दी रखना चाहते हैं और इसीलिए काफी जिम सप्लीमेंट्स और बॉडी बिल्डिंग के लिए जो यूज करते हैं सप्लीमेंट्स, ऑल दीज कैन हैव एन इफेक्ट ऑन योर स्पर्म्स and they can damage your sperm's DNA. So be careful when you use all these products. Next slide, please. अगर हम मल्टी फैक्टोरियल जो मैंने बात करी तो उसमें एक तो मैंने आपको बताया, एक तो सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट है मेडिकल हिस्ट्री ऑफ द पेशेंट. अगर उनको कोई बीमारी है जैसे डायबिटीज हो, जैसे आर्थराइटिस की दिक्कत हो, तो इन सबको ट्रीट करके एक ऐसे लेवल पे लाके जहाँ पे कंट्रोल स्टेट में लाकर ही ट्रीटमेंट करने में फायदा रहेगा. नेक्स्ट, so how much ever time it takes, most of the times when these couples come to you, to get that time, to buy that time from them is very difficult because they're already very desperate and they would tell you, no, you do it as far as possible. So it's very important as a clinician to make them understand that we should not rush into things. Let us take our own time. Let us, first solve everything, and it's like a puzzle that we are solving, and let us solve it entirely, and then, go ahead and hit the target or go ahead and try for the pregnancy. So the multifactorial causes could be presence of hydrosalpinx, or ye aajkal because India is endemic for tuberculosis, and tuberculosis causes a lot of tubal damage in nearly 70 to 80% of the women it affects. So hydrosalpinx या ट्यूब में पानी भरना ये एक बहुत कॉमन कॉज होता है, जो एक्सेसरी कॉज अदर देन द ओवरी एंड द यूट्रस दैट वी कैन थिंक अबाउट फॉर अ रिपीटेड आईवीएफ फेलियर, या किसी इन्फेक्शन का होना, suboptimal treatment of medical conditions, autoantibodies that could be present, altered endometrial receptivity, suboptimal lab culture conditions, suboptimal embryo transfers or difficult embryo transfers, and certain causes which are like really unknown or idiopathic. Next slide, please. Now, coming to the treatment options, what can be done? Next slide, please. जब भी एक कपल हमारे पास आते हैं और वो ये कहते हैं कि उनका यूजुअली फर्स्ट कंसल्टेशन में अगर वो कई बार बाहर से भी फेल हो चुके हैं, स्पेशली उस दिन जिस दिन उनका बीटा एचसीजी आया हुआ होता है, तो और प्रेगनेंसी अगर नेगेटिव आती है तो सबसे पहला क्वेश्चन यही होता है कि ये क्यों हुआ, व्हाई डिड दिस हैपन. सेकेंडली उनको ऐसा भी लगता है कि did I do something to harm the embryo, or was it me because of which the pregnancy did not happen? And thirdly, they go into that questionable mode where does it mean that I'm destined never to have a baby? But I would like to tell you that all this is not true. Next slide, please. So we can have an answer if we methodically treat it. So where do we look if we do not succeed? As I told you, it is either in the seed or in the soil. And of course, if we give the right atmosphere or correct all the multifactorial factors, like in terms of a seed and soil, I would say add adequate water, add adequate fertilizer, give enough sunlight, all those, then I think we should be through, right? So coming to the embryo factors, maternal and uterine factors, and this combined could lead to a healthy pregnancy. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, as I had mentioned already, suppose if there is any problem with the uterus. Suppose if the lady has fibroids. Now, fibroids, again, we have to know that there are 3 different types of fibroids. One fibroid which is actually very touching or maybe intruding into the endometrial cavity, which are called submucous fibroids, and they definitely have to be removed before any fertility treatment. The other form of fibroids are intramural fibroids, which could be away from the endometrial cavity. Not that they have to be removed in all cases, but yes, if you have a patient who has recurrent failures and is having an intramural fibroid, then consider removing the fibroid before you go ahead with your next embryo transfer attempt, even if the fibroid is intramural. Subserous fibroids, unless they are causing some pressure symptoms or anything, they usually do not need treatment in terms of fertility. The other thing that I had mentioned was polyp. Polyps are basically endometrial growths. Now, what does polyp do? Polyps are usually present, they can be present all throughout the endometrial cavity. And if at all they are present at the site where implantation is supposed to happen, then of course this could be a deterring factor for implantation. Or secondly, this could also cause an increased miscarriage rates post-pregnancy. So therefore, if you see a polyp and which is definitely more than around 1 centimeter or more, definitely go for removal. In my practice, I would go ahead before an embryo transfer, and especially in a case of IVF failures prior, even I would remove even the smallest polyp that I would see before going ahead with the next embryo transfer, because otherwise it's too much of a risk to take. Coming to uterine anomalies, now this is one subset of patients where again implantation could be a problem, and these patients could result in either they could end up in a biochemical pregnancy or they could not implant at all and could fall into the category of recurrent IVF failures. Now most of the times, like most of the conditions usually will just increase the miscarriage rate and would not have a determinant in the success rate of IVF per se. But conditions like septate uterus can have a resulting IVF failure as well. So if you are suspecting any of these, it's very imperative that you go ahead with a hysteroscopy, which is a keyhole surgery where we look into the uterus through a scope or through a elongated tube-like structure. We look into the uterus and find out if there's anything abnormal in the uterus, and then that can be corrected at the same sitting. So anybody who has come up with a recurrent IVF failure, and even though they have a very good endometrium or triple line pattern in the endometrium on transvaginal sonography, a hysteroscopy becomes mandatory, because there could be certain pathologies which can still be missed on a transvaginal ultrasonography. So hysteroscopy is a must for such patients to find out before the next embryo transfer. Next slide, please. Now coming to the role of laparoscopy in such patients. As I had mentioned, hydrosalpinx, collection of fluid in bilateral tubes. This could be because of some tubal disease, and in India, the most commonest cause is tuberculosis. And we do have many women coming with hydrosalpinx. Now, what happens, just lately I had a patient who had underwent 2 IVF cycles, and her HSG always showed dilated tubes. Yes, the spill was present, but the spill was really very minimal. And she wasn't even told about the thing that this could have later on got blocked and probably would have developed the hydrosalpinx, and 2 embryo transfers were done and both of which failed. So when she came for the third cycle, I told her that we have to relook at your tubes, and I started by doing a simple HSG again, and to my suspicion was correct, and her tubes were terminally blocked at this end, and both the tubes which were initially open, partially open I would say, but still had dilatation of the tubes. Now this time had complete collection of fluid all over. Now what do we do in laparoscopy in such patients, and why do we need a laparoscopy? So what happens is, if there is collection of fluid in the fallopian tubes, now this fluid is toxic. इस fluid में कुछ ऐसे toxins होते हैं कि अगर हमने एम्ब्रियो को रख दिया तो ये फ्लूइड जो है ये इस रास्ते यूट्रस के अंदर आएगी और इस एम्ब्रियो को डिस्ट्रॉय कर देगी और फिर वो एम्ब्रियो इम्प्लांट नहीं कर पाएगा. सो ऐसे सिचुएशन में व्हाट वी डू इज we do a keyhole surgery or a laparoscopic surgery, and we disconnect this tube from the uterus. In technical language, we call it tubal clipping, but actually it is just coagulation of the proximal end of the tube, so that we disconnect the tube from the uterus, so that this toxic fluid in the tubes won't have an access into the uterus, and thus will not be a deterring factor for implantation. So whenever you have a patient like this, and always ask her to get her previous HSG records and always see the film, because कई बार ऐसा होता है कि reports बहुत falsely written reports होते हैं, और films देखने पे ही हमें पता चलता है कि exact क्या situation रही है, और ऐसे पेशेंट्स को आपको काउंसिल करना पड़ेगा ट्यूबल क्लिपिंग के लिए, और ये ट्यूबल क्लिपिंग करने से काफी प्रेगनेंसी मतलब ऑलमोस्ट डबल हो जाती है प्रेगनेंसी रेट्स. नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज. ओके, नाउ कमिंग टू द एंडोमेट्रियम. अब एंडोमेट्रियम में हमेशा मेरे पेशेंट्स को जब मैं उनको अल्ट्रासाउंड दिखाती हूँ, एंड ये मेरी हैबिट रही है शुरू से कि व्हेनेवर आई डू अ स्कैन, मैं यूजुअली पेशेंट को ये स्कैन दिखाती हूँ. मुझे लगता है कि उन्हें पता होना चाहिए क्या हम क्या देख रहे हैं, so that they also get interested in it. So जब भी हम अल्ट्रासाउंड करते हैं और हम what we look for in an endometrium is a triple line pattern, और मैं उनको यही कहती हूँ कि एंडोमेट्रियम हमारे लिए एक एयरपोर्ट की रनवे की तरह है. So that is a place exactly where the plane is going to land. So हमारे लिए ये रनवे को क्लियर रखना हमेशा बहुत जरूरी होती है. And in terms of endometrium, what we look for is a good triple line endometrium, as you can see in the picture on the left side. अब कई बार ये होता है कि एंडोमेट्रियम बनती नहीं है, या एंडोमेट्रियम पतली ही रह जाती है, या उसकी थिकनेस जो है, जो यूजुअली हम कोशिश करते हैं कि उसे 7 mm से ज्यादा रखें ताकि सही से इम्प्लांटेशन हो पाए, पर कई बार इसकी थिकनेस अटेन नहीं हो पाती. तो ऐसे सिचुएशन में हम कई सारे मेडिसिन और कई सारे हमारे पास विकल्प है, या कई सारी टेक्निक्स है जिसे हम यूज करके उनकी एंडोमेट्रियम बेटर कर सकते हैं इन सब्सिक्वेंट साइकिल्स, और फिर हम प्रेगनेंसी ट्राई कर सकते हैं. नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज. Coming to one of the very important technologies that we have today, and believe me, this has really helped me crack many failed cases. This is called endometrial receptivity array. Now when we talk about endometrial receptivity array, usually हम जब भी embryo transfer करते हैं, so suppose if it's a day 5 embryo for a patient, then for those who have undergone an IVF cycle would agree with me, like progesterone is started. Progesterone means in the form of the vaginal tablets, pessaries that you take, common tablets like Dufaston or injectable progesterone. All this is started depending on which day the embryo was frozen in a frozen transfer cycle. So suppose if it's a day 5 frozen embryo, then this progesterone is started 5 days before the transfer. Now this is the universal rule, and this applies in nearly 80% of women. But there are 20% of women who will not fall into this category. Now what happens in them? Their endometrium is either not ready to accept that day 5 embryo, or they are over ready, or they are in that post receptive stage where they cannot accept this embryo, because for every uterus there is a window of implantation, and it is only during that window of implantation will the uterus be ready to accept that embryo. वो एम्ब्रियो को चिपकाने के लिए उस विंडो ऑफ इम्प्लांटेशन के दौरान ही सक्षम रहेगी. तो अगर ये प्री रिसेप्टिव स्टेज में है, मतलब 5 दिन के बाद भी, 5 दिन प्रोजेस्टेरॉन लेने के बाद भी जो एंडोमेट्रियम की एज है, अगर वो 5 दिन की नहीं है और हम 5वें दिन का एम्ब्रियो डाल रहे हैं, तो वो एम्ब्रियो नहीं चिपकेगी. और यही अगर वो ऑलरेडी पहले से ही रेडी हो चुकी है और वो विंडो क्लोज हो जाता है जब हम एम्ब्रियो डाल रहे हैं, तब भी वो प्रेगनेंसी नहीं होगी. तो ये 20% महिलाओं में जो इनफर्टिलिटी से जूझ रही है, उनमें ये डिफेक्ट पाया जाता है. और ये जो टेक्नोलॉजी है, इसके जरिए वी कैन क्रैक ऑल दीज केसेस wherein this window of implantation is displaced. और ये एक टेस्ट के द्वारा किया जाता है, which is called as endometrial receptivity array. Now what we do is we prepare the endometrium as in a frozen transfer cycle, and rather than putting the embryos back in that same cycle, so after say 5 days of progesterone, what we do is we take a small tissue from the endometrium and send it for genetic analysis. And then the genes are assessed in the endometrial tissue and found out whether the gene it falls in that pre-receptive category, receptive category, or post-receptive category. And according to that, the report comes like, you should consider, like I have a patient running who's a 6th IVF cycle who conceived with me. She's now around 4 months pregnant, and her ERA was displaced to 160 plus or minus 3 hours. So for her, we had to do a day 7 transfer. So, and then it clicked. So probably why her IVF cycles were failing previously was like, most of the times the embryo was put in a pre-receptive endometrium, and by the time the window of implantation had opened, her embryo had already perished and failed to get implanted. So as I told you, this technology can help us crack many such failure cases. Next slide, please. Now coming to assessment of sperms, again sperms are very important, so when we talk about technology, usually how we select sperm in an ICSI is by microscopic assessment. Nowadays we have various technologies like magnetic assisted cell sorting, microfluidics, by which we can, select a sperm which is good enough for ICSI. Now, magnetic assortment of sperms or magnetic assisted cell sorting is a technology by which we run the semen sample through a magnetic field, and by which if the sperms are defective or if the sperms are abnormal, then the magnetic field pulls these sperms back, and only the sperms which are good will trickle in, and we can use these sperms to optimize the pregnancy rates. So those patients where you are having high sperm DFI, as I had mentioned, DNA fragmentation index, or those men who have had recurrent failures, without any apparent semen sample abnormalities, in those patients you can really try techniques like magnetic assortment of sperms. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So what if we come to a conclusion where, the sperms also looked okay, you've done everything to select the best possible sperm, the oocytes also look fine, but yes, still pregnancy is not happening. Then genetic evaluation of the couple becomes important. You need to start with the basic karyotyping for both the couples. We have to, though testing for thrombophilias or testing for a condition where there's excessive blood clotting in the lady is not mandatory, but yes, that could be one of the ways by which you can tackle a case of recurrent IVF failures as well. So you have to investigate patients in those lines. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. No, please, yeah. So, no, one more slide, previous one. Yeah. So the standard morphological, next one, yes, this one. Standard morphological evaluation has been the most widely used method for embryo selection. That means examination of the embryo and grading it under microscope still remains one of the standard methods by which we determine whether an embryo is good to give a pregnancy or not. Now, in recurrent IVF failures where you have tried everything else and nothing is found to be working, next slide, please. Pre-implantation genetic screening of the embryos or pre-implantation genetic test, PGTA, could be one of the ways by which you can determine which embryos are normal and which embryos can subsequently give rise to pregnancy. So embryo screen for aneuploidies where the genetic background is presumably normal. When both the husband and wife are presumably normal, their karyotyping is normal. And for those patients, if we want to go ahead with a repeat cycle, always, prepare the patient for a PGT. So at least we know from the embryo side that what embryo we are putting is normal. Now we just have to tackle with the multifactorial factors and the endometrial factors. combining PGTA and ERA together, we have cracked so many cases where, we have used this together and we've had pregnancies. So what do we do in a PGTA? Next slide, please. Next slide. What we do is, we do a biopsy of the embryo. So now this is a day 3 embryo, and as you can see, we're pulling out a cell out of the embryo. We're making a hole here through laser. As you can see this breach, but don't worry, it's a very, very tiny hole. Okay, don't worry that the embryo ko chhed kar diya. No, it's not like that. So we just take out a small 1 or 2 cells and then send it for genetic analysis. Initially, when we started, day 3 embryos were quite, embryo biopsy was quite rampant. But over a period of time, उसके कुछ disadvantages सामने आए, जैसे mosaicism, जैसे उस report के ऊपर आप 100% नहीं rely कर सकते थे. So ऐसे embryo biopsy करने का कोई point नहीं था और उसकी analysis करने की फिर कोई point नहीं थी, क्योंकि report की validity अगर ना हो, so then it's futile, it's pointless. So then we started doing blastocyst embryo biopsy. So here again, as you see, ये जो outer wall, outer जो zona pellucida layer होता है, ये वाला layer, उसमें we make a small opening through laser. They are minute openings, and from there, through this aspiration needle, we just aspirate a few trophoectodermal cells. ट्रोफोएक्टोडर्मल सेल्स वो सेल्स होते हैं जो बाहरी भाग में होता है ब्लास्टोसिस्ट के या डे 5 एम्ब्रियो के, which is later on going to help us form a placenta. Mind you, we are not touching those cells which is going to form the baby. So technically, potentially, we are not harming the embryo in any form. Next slide, please. And then these cells are taken out and then they are sent for genetic analysis. And nowadays, we run these cells on next generation sequencing platform where, close to 100% we can detect if there is any genetic abnormality in the embryo, and then distinguish whether which embryo is abnormal and which is normal, and then just transfer the normal embryos back. Now, whenever to start with, we don't tell patients to go ahead with PGT for unless there is some issue. So many of the times couple comes with the query why PGT was not done in my first attempt of IVF itself. So, doing that would be unethical. It won't be right because all these technologies, of course, they are a boon, but they cost. So, just ordering them left, right, and center for every patient is not right. You have to identify those patients who will benefit from it and then go ahead with it. Yes, retrospectively, many a times we also feel, oh, we should have checked the embryos, but then those cases would always be there. You can't set it as a thumb rule. Second is, many patients come to the clinic and say, okay, ठीक है, हमारा 2-3 तो फेल हो चुका है, अब आप 100% सक्सेस रेट बताओगे तो हम ट्रीट करेंगे. But 100% success rate in IVF is really a myth. And if anybody is telling you that, then that's a big sham that they are doing. Because I keep seeing advertisements and everywhere where money back and everything. See, we are creating a life after all, and as we all understand that life is really uncertain for each one of us who are living also. So how can we be so sure that we can create a life? All this is an attempt to get you pregnant, and all this, if it is done in the right form, then can get you pregnant. So many of the patients are worried, okay, so will I have an additional procedure on me? See, most of the technologies that are being used today, they are technologies that we use in the IVF laboratory. So nothing per se on the patient. Yes, if you're going ahead with something like endometrial receptivity array or hysteroscopy, they are kind of safe procedures. ERA is a procedure which endometrial biopsy, we just take it in the OPD setting itself. So it will really not harm you in any ways. So then the next question, if all embryos are abnormal, what do I do? That is the time when you have to decide. So, if a couple is coming to me, as I told you before, then we actually started this webinar was, so if I feel that there is nothing much that can be done, it's always better to be honest and tell the patient that this is a scenario and, we can still go ahead and try, but we really don't know if we can do something extra for you. Coming to the fact that, if at all a lady has undergone 1 or 2 IVF cycles And if you stringently study their cycle, we should have a clue of what has gone wrong or why their cycle has not succeeded. So if you have that cause in mind, and if you strongly believe that it is either an oocyte factor or a strong sperm factor which is causing them, to have a failed cycle, then you should really tell them at that juncture that, it would be better for them to go ahead with donor oocytes or donor sperms to improve their chances of success in the future attempts. So it's always important to draw a line when to stop. Yeah, there was just a few years back, there was this lady from Surat who was an advocate by profession, if I'm not wrong, and she conceived in her 22nd IVF cycle. For me, hats off to her, hats off to her spirit and courage. But I think in my practice, I wouldn't let my patient go till that long. If at all, if I've done 1 or 2 or 3 cycles maximum, I can understand what the issue is. And of course, every cycle that I would give is probably the best attempt that I could give, and use the best technologies that is available. So always feel free to guide your patients about alternative options like surrogacy, adoption, whatever may be the situation, or go ahead with a oocyte donation or a sperm donation or an embryo donation program if need arises. Next slide, please. So thank you so much for your presence here on this webinar. I hope this has put insight into some of the factors that can be corrected, and this, if not all, maybe I could have rekindled the hope in a few of those who are attending this webinar, and motivate them to not give up and go ahead with further treatment.
Thank you, ma'am, for all your inputs. And I'm sure that our viewers must have benefited on actually listening out from you that all of the things that creep in the mind when there is a failed IVF cycle, it is not at all true. There are multifactorial things which you have enlightened the viewers. So, ma'am, we will be starting the Q&A session in which I have 2 questions from one of my viewers. So, her question is, hi ma'am, I live in Delhi and I am 28-year-old and married for 6 years. I went through IVF cycle with my eggs in February and got IVF failed. My doctor advised me that even if I try again, I just have a 50% chance. So I am confused that what should I do? And can I repeat my IVF in the same year? Will it be safe?
Hi. One of the common concerns that we have, as I had, rightly put forward in the beginning of the presentation, the success rate of IVF is around 65% only. So if somebody is telling you 50%, go ahead. But of course, you have gone through one IVF cycle. It's very imperative that we understand what was the cause of failure in that cycle. And, understand that cause, tackle it, and then go ahead. That would be wiser. Going ahead with another cycle just for the heck of it will not make a big difference. And coming to the second question, whether it is safe for you to undergo a repeat IVF cycle in the same year. See, most of the IVF cycle injections, just 2 days back, I had another webinar on understanding the basics of IVF and ICSI. Whatever injections and injections we use, they have a stipulated half-life, or they remain in our body for a stipulated amount of time. And they are the hormones that is generally being produced in our body. So that would technically cause no harm. But personally, I would tell them that, if at all you're just 28, so it's not like, unless I don't know your ovarian reserve or anything at this stage. So if you have a good, presuming that you have a good ovarian reserve, then you should, you can wait and take your own time, because it will be your own body which is going to, you should feel it's the right time for you to go ahead with the next cycle. So if you feel, bodily or even with a mental state, you are in a state to go ahead with the second cycle, don't worry about the side effects or any ill effects of the treatment per se on yourself. The most important thing is your body should be ready and your mind should be ready. This is in the context that your ovarian reserves are fine. But for somebody whose ovarian reserves are going down, then probably, yes, you need to go ahead with another cycle till it, unless it drops down further, to a point where, you know, again, the chances of success with IVF would be very low. So I
Great.
hope this answer your
Great
question.
insight.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. A great, ma'am. I think, yes, the answer that you gave, that both clinically and psychologically a patient has to be ready. I think Mr. Sharma, you're done with the answer. Ma'am, the second viewer has asked a question. My husband is alcoholic and smokes a lot. My all blood reports and ultrasounds were normal and we went for IVF cycle which got failed. What are the tests my husband should undergo and precautions that if we plan for next IVF cycle?
Hi, I'm really sorry to know that your IVF cycle failed, because this was one factor which probably could have been corrected in the first go itself. Yes, smoking and alcoholic injection for a long period of time can cause, you know, severe damage in the sperm's DNA, as I had mentioned. So a thorough counseling of your husband would be required. Of course, you know, for anybody, you know, it won't be practical that they suddenly stop smoking or drinking one fine day. It will be difficult, but it will be a process. But your husband definitely needs good counseling, and tell him alternative ways by which he can curb his habit and bring it down to minimum. Of course, use of certain antioxidant medicines for prolonged period of time can help you. The tests that can be done, you know, because it's very, suppose you have to tell this to your husband, most of the times they would be in a denial state. Oh, it's not because of that. Why, you know, so many people drink and so many people have children. So many of the times they would, you know, logically justify this. But it's very important, like if you have to document it, doing a sperm DFI would be very imperative, because then you document it in the form of a report and you show the report to the patient. See, your values are getting deranged because of this. And in my practice, I've seen that then it becomes, it's easier for the husband to understand that there is an issue and that needs to be corrected. So a proper thorough counseling, and of course stringency in the form of you know, abstaining or cutting it down to minimum, a regulated lifestyle, and a certain use of certain medication should definitely help you. But all this should be done before you take the next step of a next IVF cycle.
Then, ma'am, thank you. So the next question is from Mrs. Roy. She's saying that I went through an IVF cycle, but the child did not have a heartbeat. So what can be the reasons for it? And is there any chance, and what should be the precautions I could take that I can avoid this and have a heartbeat in my child?
Okay. See, actually, the child not having a heartbeat, there could be various factors to it. If I divide the factors, then the three major factors, one could be, there could be an abnormality in the embryo itself, because of which the embryo did not result in a viable pregnancy even after implantation. Secondly, there could be a factor wherein the embryo got implanted in the uterus, but it is not able to sustain itself or not grow further to a stage where, you know, the heartbeat is developing. Third, it could be certain abnormalities in the uterus per se, you know, sometimes there are septum, or there sometimes are the other things because of which the embryo is not getting enough blood supply from the mother so as to sustain itself. So I really don't know your case history. It would be very imperative that we go through the history of things, and because out of the three causes that I mentioned, two are very much correctable. So if we just focus on those two factors, of course, the embryo factor can be, you know, if we can go through PGS form, identify a normal embryo and transfer, but the other two factors are very easily correctable. So I would like to I would want you that get yourself checked by a good doctor, and, you know, let the doctor completely assess your case, go through all your records, and then determine what could be the factor in their minds, and then tackle it that way. I hope this answers your query.
Yeah. So done, ma'am. So the next question from the one of the viewers is that what are the causes of adenomyosis, and what should be done to correct it?
See, adenomyosis is basically endometriosis interna. So if you know of this condition called endometriosis, wherein the uterine lining is coming outside the uterus and growing elsewhere, be it on the ovary, be it in the peritoneum, the abdominal cavity, anywhere. So likewise, if it grows into the muscle layer of the uterus, that is called as adenomyosis. Now, what adenomyosis causes is it will cause a globular enlargement in the uterus, and to some extent the blood supply of such a uterus is kind of curtailed, and because of which there could be problems associated with implantation. Now we have to understand that adenomyosis basically could be of two types. One is a diffuse, means the whole uterus is enlarged, and the other could be a localized enlargement. That is, in the technical terms, it is called as a focal adenomyoma. So if there is a diffuse enlargement, of course, we can't remove the uterus because then it defeats the entire purpose of fertility. So in those, if anybody has diffuse adenomyosis, then there are certain injections which can be given to curtail the adenomyosis and then go ahead with an embryo transfer. So the chances of pregnancy increases. Or suppose if anybody has got a focal adenomyoma, then it would be wiser to go ahead with an adenomyomectomy, or like you remove the fibroid, you remove that focal adenomyoma and then then contemplate a pregnancy. Especially in those cases where, medical management has been tried and it's a focal adenomyoma and the patient has repeated IVF failures, it's always better to go ahead with adenomyomectomy and then go ahead with an embryo transfer. I hope this answers your query.
Yeah, done, ma'am. So, ma'am, one more question is from our viewers. He's asking that you have just told about MAX procedure. Does it involve the hospitalization or any surgery?
No, absolutely not. It will not involve anything. It is just simple, like, the husband is going to coming to the clinic and giving his semen sample. Whatever happens in the laboratory, and the entire procedure would take around 1.5 hours. So the patient is completely not a party to this. Everything happens in the laboratory. So whatever is being done is on the semen sample, and you can absolutely relax because there's nothing that is done on the patient per se.
Thank you, ma'am. It would be very relaxing for the patient to know this. Okay, so we are done with all the questions for today. So thank you, Dr. Aswati, for giving such a time and explaining us ki yes, recurrent IVF failures also can also be solved. And thank you, viewers. You can, all of you, call us on 1800-103-2229. That's our toll-free number. And write all your queries. We would be happy to answer on all about fertility at novaivffertility.com. We'll be meeting again tomorrow with Dr. Parul Katyar at 3:30 p.m. Till then, goodbye and have a nice day, all of you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And I just tell you, don't lose hope.